Hello again, grade 6, and welcome to another math lesson. Here we are at lesson 100, the 100th lesson of math. How fun is that? Think of all the math that you have learned in 100 lessons. So much math. Ready to learn some more. Actually, the first part is a little bit review. So we are moving into integer multiplication. And what we have to remember before we begin integer multiplication is that multiplication is really just another way to express repeated addition. So what we have here is an addition sentence or an addition statement. We have 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15. Now, you should remember that another way that we can write 5 plus 5 plus 5 is simply 3 times 5, and you get the same answer of 15. So just something to keep in mind, that multiplication is the same as repeated addition. All right, the next thing that we have to review before we get into actually doing some multiplication is the different ways in math that we can show multiplication. We have done this once before when we were talking about algebra, especially because if you remember in algebra you used the letter X a lot. So the way that you are used to showing multiplication, 2 times 3 with an X in the middle, was not that helpful in algebra because it could get a little bit confusing. Is the X a multiplication sign? Is the X a variable that we are trying to work with, or one of the letters in algebra that we are trying to work with? It got a little bit confusing. So in algebra, and actually a lot when you get into some more difficult types of math, multiplication is going to be shown in these ways, and that's what we're going to review today. That's what your textbook is going to use, and it's a good way to show multiplication without using an X. All right, so the first one we have over here, you can show multiplication by just using a dot instead of an X. Okay, so that takes out the problem of the X being in your equation. Another way, and these three ways are all tied together down here, is simply to just put numbers next to each other using brackets. All right, so when we get to more complicated types of math and when you get to your lesson today, if you see two numbers that are right next to each other using brackets in one of these three ways, either brackets around the second number, brackets around the first number, or brackets around both of the numbers, think to yourself, that means multiply. And that's going to become handy when we do questions today that involve, if you think about if we were to do 2 times a negative 3, well, we've got two different signs there. It's maybe a little bit confusing. You could solve that problem by putting a bracket around the negative 3, or another little shortcut, you could just do 2 times negative 3 like that. All right, so actual multiplication of integers is not that difficult as long as you know how to multiply, which I know all of you know how to do, and also as long as you remember two very important rules. So the first rule we have here is if you are multiplying two numbers that have the same sign, your answer is going to be positive. Okay, so you're used to doing a question like 2 times 3 and getting a positive 6. You've been doing that for years, so that should hopefully be nice and easy for you to remember. They have the same sign. We have a positive 2 times a positive 3. We get an answer of a positive 6. Now, the rule also applies to questions like this. When we have two negative numbers being multiplied together, you also get a positive product. So you just have to think to yourself, what's 2 times 3? Answer is 6. And since both of my numbers are negative, they have the same sign, we have a positive product. Okay, so don't get confused and think because you are multiplying two negative numbers together, you should have a negative as an answer. That is not the case. And here's a little bit of a grammar tie-in. In grammar, we've talked about double negatives. If you say math doesn't make no sense, if you use two negatives in the same sentence, they actually make a positive together. If you say math doesn't make no sense, then you're actually making a positive statement that math does make sense. So maybe that's a little bit of a memory trick for you. If you have two negatives, your answer is still going to be positive. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is just when we have different cases, when you have two numbers that are being multiplied together where they have different signs. So we have here a positive 2 and we have a negative 3. Because they have different signs, your answer is going to be negative. And it works the same way if your negative number is first, your positive number is second. Because they have different signs, your answer is negative. So as long as you know how to multiply and you remember those two rules, if you have a different sign, you get a negative product or a negative answer. And if you have the same sign, you have a positive product or a positive answer, then this lesson should be pretty simple for you. I would maybe suggest, going back over here, writing out these different ways to show multiplication, or even just ones like this to help you remind yourself that multiplication can be shown in different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be an X in between the two numbers that you are multiplying. And that is it for today. So check on your checklist and there will be a list of numbers that you have to complete in your textbook. And good luck. And once again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me.